Everyone called me a cheater, but they don't know the truth. What if the text that destroyed your reputation was actually the key to uncovering your partner's darkest secret? My name is Amanda, and I was 28 years old when my entire world came crashing down around me. It all started on what should have been just another ordinary Tuesday evening. Michael, my boyfriend of 2 years, had come home early from work, which was unusual but not alarming. We had met through mutual friends at a barbecue, and from the moment our eyes met across the crowded backyard, I felt something I had never experienced before. Michael was charming, successful, and incredibly attentive. He worked as a financial advisor at a prestigious firm downtown, and his dedication to his career was matched only by his dedication to our relationship. Our relationship had moved quickly, with Michael introducing me to his circle of friends within just a few weeks. They all welcomed me with open arms, and soon I was part of their regular gatherings, weekend trips, and dinner parties. Michael and I moved in together after 8 months of dating, finding a beautiful apartment in the city with a view of the skyline. Life seemed perfect, almost too perfect, but I pushed aside any nagging doubts, attributing them to my own insecurities. The evening everything changed started like any other. Michael came home with my favorite takeout, claiming he'd had a particularly good day at work and wanted to celebrate. We ate dinner on our balcony, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. Michael seemed more affectionate than usual, holding my hand, kissing my forehead, and telling me how much he loved me. I should have known something was off, but I was too caught up in the moment to see the signs. After dinner, Michael suggested we watch a movie, something we rarely did on weeknights due to our busy schedules. I agreed, curling up next to him on the sofa as he scrolled through the options. Halfway through the film, my phone buzzed on the coffee table. I didn't think much of it, assuming it was just a work notification or a message from a friend. Michael, however, seemed to tense up beside me. When the movie ended, Michael suggested we have a glass of wine before bed. I went to the kitchen to pour us some, leaving my phone unattended on the coffee table. When I returned, Michael was sitting on the sofa, holding my phone in his hand. His face was unreadable, but there was a hardness in his eyes that I had never seen before. "What's this?" he asked, his voice dangerously calm as he showed me my phone. On the screen was a text message from an unknown number that read, "The evidence is conclusive. He's been living a double life. We should meet tomorrow to discuss your options." My heart sank. I had forgotten to delete the message from Detective Wilson, the private investigator I had hired 3 weeks ago. I had been growing suspicious of Michael's frequent business trips and the times he would disappear for hours without explanation. At first, I had dismissed my concerns as paranoia, but when I found a receipt for a women's diamond necklace in his jacket pocket, I knew I had to investigate further. "I can explain," I started, but Michael cut me off, his voice rising with each word. "Explain what? That you've been cheating on me? That all those late nights at work were actually spent with someone else?" He stood up, pacing the living room like a caged animal. "How long, Amanda? How long have you been lying to me?" I tried to tell him the truth, that the text was from a private investigator I had hired because I suspected he was hiding something from me. But Michael was too angry to listen. He threw my phone across the room, where it shattered against the wall. "I trusted you," he yelled, his face red with anger. "I loved you, and this whole time you've been betraying me behind my back?" Before I could respond, Michael stormed into our bedroom and began throwing my belongings into a suitcase. I stood frozen in the living room, watching as the life we had built together came apart before my eyes. When he emerged from the bedroom, suitcase in hand, he looked at me with such contempt that I barely recognized the man I had fallen in love with. "I want you out of here by morning," he said, his voice cold and detached. "And don't even think about contacting me or any of our friends. You've humiliated me for the last time." With that, he walked out of the apartment, slamming the door behind him. I stood there in silence, surrounded by the remnants of our shattered relationship, wondering how everything had gone so wrong so quickly. Little did I know, this was only the beginning of the nightmare that would consume my life in the coming weeks. The morning after Michael discovered the text message, I woke up to find that he had changed the locks on our apartment. My belongings were packed in trash bags and left outside the door, a clear indication that he wanted me gone immediately. With no place to go and no one to call, I called a taxi and checked into a cheap motel on the outskirts of town, using the last of my available credit. The first few days were a blur of tears and confusion. I tried calling Michael multiple times, hoping to explain the situation and clear up the misunderstanding, but he never answered. Instead, he sent me a single text message: "Don't ever contact me again. You've ruined everything." What hurt more than Michael's rejection was the silence from our mutual friends. People I had considered close confidants, who had been part of my life for nearly 2 years, suddenly vanished. My calls went unanswered, my messages were left on read, and I found myself blocked on social media platforms. It was as if I had been erased from their lives overnight. A week after the breakup, I received a message from my best friend, Rachel, who had been my maid of honor at my first wedding and had stood by me through thick and thin. Her message was short and to the point. "I can't believe you would do this to Michael. After everything he's done for you, you should be ashamed of yourself." I tried to respond, to explain that things weren't as they seemed, but before I could send my reply, she blocked me. The rejection stung more than I had anticipated, and I found myself questioning whether I had made the right decision in hiring the private investigator. Maybe I should have trusted Michael. Maybe I was overreacting. Maybe I had let my insecurities get the better of me. As the days turned into weeks, the isolation grew more intense. I had taken a leave of absence from my job as a marketing manager, unable to face the questions and whispers that followed me wherever I went. Rumors were spreading like wildfire, each more elaborate and damaging than the last. According to office gossip, I had been cheating on Michael for months, using our shared apartment as a rendezvous point while he was at work. Some even claimed I had stolen money from him to fund my illicit affair. The truth was far more complicated, but with no one willing to listen, I remained trapped in a prison of public perception. My reputation, which I had spent years building, lay in ruins around me. People I barely knew felt entitled to judge me, to offer their unsolicited opinions on my character and my choices. Strangers would stare at me in public, whispering to their companions as I passed by. Even the cashier at the local grocery store, who had always been friendly and warm, now looked at me with disapproval. The most painful blow came when I received a certified letter from Michael's attorney. In it, he demanded that I return all the gifts he had given me during our relationship, including a necklace he had bought me for our anniversary, the designer handbag he had surprised me with for my birthday, and even the coffee maker we had purchased together. The letter was cold and impersonal, a stark contrast to the warm, loving man I had known. What hurt most was not the loss of material possessions, but the finality of it all. Michael was not just ending our relationship, he was erasing every trace of it, pretending that the 2 years we had spent together meant nothing. I felt as if I was mourning not just the end of a relationship, but the death of a future I had envisioned for myself. As I sat alone in my motel room, surrounded by boxes of my belongings, I realized that I had 2 choices. I could continue to wallow in self-pity, allowing others to define my narrative, or I could fight back and reclaim my story. The decision was made easier when I received a call from Detective Wilson, the private investigator I had hired. "I have some information that you might find interesting," he said, his voice professional yet tinged with an urgency that caught my attention. "It seems your suspicions were not unfounded. In fact, the reality of the situation is much more complicated than either of us could have imagined." I listened as Detective Wilson outlined what he had discovered, my initial despair slowly transforming into determination. The truth was more shocking than I had anticipated, and it was clear that Michael had been living a double life long before I had entered the picture. Armed with this knowledge, I knew what I had to do. That night, as I packed my belongings into storage containers, I made a promise to myself. I would not allow Michael to destroy my reputation without a fight. I would not let his lies define me. And most importantly, I would ensure that the truth came to light, no matter the cost. The next few weeks were a blur of activity as I worked with Detective Wilson to gather more evidence against Michael. I had moved out of the motel and into a small studio apartment on the other side of town, using the last of my savings to pay the deposit and first month's rent. The apartment was modest, with just enough room for a bed, a small kitchenette, and a tiny living area, but it was mine, and for the first time in weeks, I felt a sense of control over my life. Detective Wilson was thorough in his investigation, following Michael for hours each day, documenting his movements and compiling a detailed timeline of his activities. What he discovered was both shocking and validating. Michael was not just cheating on me, he was leading a completely separate life that I had known nothing about. According to Detective Wilson's report, Michael had been married for 5 years to a woman named Jennifer, a kindergarten teacher who lived in a suburban neighborhood about an hour outside the city. They owned a home together, had 2 dogs, and even shared a joint bank account. What was most surprising was that many of Michael's business trips were actually trips he took with his wife, often to destinations he had claimed to be visiting alone for work conferences. As I sifted through the evidence Detective Wilson had collected, I felt a mix of emotions. There was anger, of course, at the betrayal and deception. There was sadness for the life I thought I had, which now seemed like nothing more than an illusion. But there was also relief, a sense of vindication that my suspicions had been correct all along. I hadn't been paranoid or insecure. I had been right to question Michael's behavior. The question now was what to do with this information. Part of me wanted to confront Michael immediately, to expose him for the liar and cheat he was. But another part of me hesitated, knowing that such a confrontation would likely lead to more denial and gaslighting. Michael had proven himself to be a master manipulator, and I had no doubt that he would try to twist the truth to suit his narrative. Instead, I decided to focus on rebuilding my life. I reached out to my former employer, explaining the situation and requesting to return to my position as marketing manager. To my surprise, my boss was understanding and agreed to let me come back, though she warned me that there might still be some residual gossip to contend with. I also began reconnecting with friends who had distanced themselves after the breakup. Some were receptive, willing to listen to my side of the story and offer their support. Others remained skeptical, still convinced that I was the one who had betrayed Michael. It was a painful process, but I knew that true friends would stand by me, regardless of the rumors. As I slowly rebuilt my social and professional life, Detective Wilson continued his investigation, uncovering more details about Michael's double life. He discovered that Michael had a pattern of entering into relationships with women while still married to Jennifer, often using the same lines and promises he had used with me. What's more, Detective Wilson found evidence that Michael had been siphoning money from his clients at the financial firm where he worked, using it to fund his lavish lifestyle and maintain his separate households. Armed with this information, I knew I had to take action, not just for my own sake, but for the sake of Jennifer, who deserved to know the truth about her husband, and for Michael's clients, who were being defrauded. I contacted a lawyer, explaining the situation and providing her with the evidence Detective Wilson had gathered. She agreed to represent me, not just in my personal dispute with Michael, but also in potential legal action against him for fraud. The decision to take legal action was not an easy one. I knew it would mean reliving the pain and humiliation of the past few weeks, subjecting myself to scrutiny and judgment once again. But I also knew that staying silent would be a form of complicity, allowing Michael to continue his deception without consequence. As I prepared for the legal battle ahead, I received an unexpected call from Jennifer, Michael's wife. She had found my number among Michael's belongings and, curious about the woman who had been calling her husband, decided to reach out. The conversation was awkward at first, filled with hesitation and uncertainty on both sides. But as we began to share our stories, a sense of solidarity emerged between us. Jennifer had suspected that Michael was cheating for months, but had never been able to prove it. My story provided the missing pieces of the puzzle, confirming her suspicions and giving her the courage to take action. We agreed to meet in person, to share what we knew, and to decide how best to confront Michael. The meeting took place at a quiet coffee shop halfway between our homes. As I sat across from Jennifer, a woman I had never met but with whom I now shared a painful connection, I felt a mix of emotions. There was guilt, of course, for having been involved with a married man, even unknowingly. There was anger at Michael for putting both of us in this position. But there was also a sense of empowerment, a feeling that together we could expose the truth and ensure that Michael faced the consequences of his actions. As we shared our stories, comparing notes and piecing together the timeline of Michael's deception, we realized that his pattern of behavior was more calculated and manipulative than either of us had imagined. He had been living a double life for years, moving seamlessly between his two worlds, leaving a trail of broken hearts and shattered trust in his wake. By the end of our meeting, Jennifer and I had formed an unlikely alliance, united in our determination to hold Michael accountable for his actions. We agreed to work together, to combine our evidence and our resources to ensure that the truth came out. As we left the coffee shop, exchanging contact information and promising to stay in touch, I felt a sense of hope for the first time in weeks. I was no longer alone in this fight, and together, we would ensure that Michael's web of lies came crashing down around him. The following weeks were a whirlwind of legal preparations and strategic planning. Jennifer and I met regularly with our respective lawyers, sharing evidence and coordinating our approach. We decided to file separate lawsuits. Jennifer would file for divorce on grounds of infidelity, while I would pursue legal action for emotional distress and fraud. Additionally, we plan to report Michael's financial misconduct to the appropriate regulatory authorities, ensuring that he would face professional consequences as well. As we worked with our legal teams, Detective Wilson continued to gather evidence, documenting Michael's movements and communications. He discovered that Michael had been using his position at the financial firm to target vulnerable clients, particularly elderly individuals who were less likely to question his investment strategies. The depth of his deception was staggering, and the more we uncovered, the more determined we became to see justice served. Meanwhile, Michael remained oblivious to the impending legal storm. He had moved on with his life, seemingly unaffected by the end of our relationship. According to social media posts and mutual acquaintances, he was dating again, already introducing his new girlfriend to our former friends. The speed with which he had replaced me was both hurtful and revealing, further confirmation of his manipulative nature. The first blow came when Jennifer filed for divorce, citing irreconcilable differences and infidelity. The divorce papers were served to Michael at his office, a strategic move designed to maximize his humiliation. According to Jennifer's lawyer, Michael was shocked and initially denied the allegations, claiming that he and Jennifer had been separated for months. However, the evidence we had gathered, including photographs of Michael and Jennifer on vacation just weeks before our breakup, contradicted his claims. Michael's reaction to the divorce filing was predictable. He immediately contacted our former friends, spinning a narrative in which he was the victim of a vindictive wife who was trying to ruin his reputation. He portrayed Jennifer as unstable and jealous, claiming that she had fabricated the allegations of infidelity out of spite. It was a classic case of projection, with Michael accusing Jennifer of the very behavior he himself was guilty of. What Michael didn't anticipate was Jennifer's response. Instead of remaining silent, she decided to share her side of the story, posting a detailed account of their marriage on her social media profiles. She included evidence of Michael's infidelity, including text messages and photographs, and even mentioned my name, acknowledging that I, too, had been deceived by Michael's lies. The post went viral, shared thousands of times within hours. Suddenly, the narrative shifted, and people began to question the story Michael had been spinning. Our former friends, who had been quick to judge me, now found themselves reevaluating their loyalties. Some reached out to apologize, admitting that they had been too quick to believe Michael's version of events. Others remained silent, perhaps too embarrassed to admit their mistake or too loyal to Michael to abandon him completely. For me, Jennifer's post was a turning point. It was the first time that my side of the story had been validated publicly, the first time that someone other than Detective Wilson and my lawyer had acknowledged that I, too, was a victim of Michael's deception. The support I received from strangers online was overwhelming, with hundreds of people sharing their own stories of betrayal and deception. Emboldened by this shift in public perception, I decided to take the next step in my legal action against Michael. My lawyer filed a lawsuit alleging intentional infliction of emotional distress, fraud, and misrepresentation. The complaint detailed Michael's deception, including his marriage to Jennifer, his pattern of infidelity, and the financial misconduct he had engaged in at his workplace. We also included evidence of the public humiliation I had endured as a result of Michael's lies, documenting the loss of friendships, professional opportunities, and reputation. The lawsuit was served to Michael at his apartment just days after Jennifer's divorce filing. According to my lawyer, Michael was visibly shaken, his usual confident demeanor replaced by a look of panic and disbelief. For the first time, it seemed that Michael was beginning to realize the gravity of his situation, the potential consequences of his actions. As the legal proceedings moved forward, Jennifer and I focused on rebuilding our lives. She had decided to sell the house she shared with Michael, using the proceeds to start fresh in a new city. I had returned to my job, where I was slowly regaining the trust and respect of my colleagues. We both started therapy, working through the trauma of Michael's betrayal and the public humiliation we had endured. Through it all, Jennifer and I grew closer, forming a friendship born of shared experience and mutual support. We talked regularly, sharing updates on our respective legal cases and offering encouragement during difficult moments. We even made plans to meet up once the legal dust had settled, to celebrate our newfound freedom and the beginning of a new chapter in our lives. The next blow to Michael came when the Financial Regulatory Agency launched an investigation into his professional conduct. Based on the evidence we had provided, they found probable cause to believe that Michael had engaged in fraudulent activities, including misappropriation of client funds and providing false information to investors. The investigation was thorough and comprehensive, leaving no stone unturned as they examined Michael's records and interviewed his clients and colleagues. As the investigation progressed, more victims came forward, sharing stories of how Michael had taken advantage of their trust and financial vulnerability. The scope of his fraud was much larger than anyone had anticipated, with millions of dollars missing from client accounts. The evidence was overwhelming, and it became clear that Michael would face not just civil penalties, but potential criminal charges as well. The media coverage of the investigation was extensive, with local news outlets and financial publications running stories about Michael's misconduct. The once respected financial advisor was now exposed as a con artist, a manipulator who had preyed on the trust of those around him for his own gain. The public perception of Michael had shifted dramatically, and he was now viewed not as a victim of infidelity, but as a perpetrator of fraud and deception. As the legal proceedings continued, Michael became increasingly desperate. He reached out to me multiple times, alternately threatening and pleading, offering to settle the lawsuit out of court if I would drop the charges. He even tried to manipulate Jennifer, using their shared history and the memories of their life together to guilt her into abandoning the divorce proceedings. But Jennifer and I stood firm, refusing to be swayed by Michael's attempts at manipulation. We had come too far, sacrificed too much to back down now. We were determined to see this through to the end, to ensure that Michael faced the consequences of his actions and that justice was served. As the trial date approached, I felt a mix of emotions. There was anxiety, of course, at the prospect of facing Michael in court and reliving the painful events of the past few months, but there was also a sense of empowerment, a feeling that I was finally taking control of my narrative and reclaiming my life. I was no longer a passive victim of Michael's deception. I was an active participant in my own redemption, fighting for the truth and for justice. The day of the trial arrived with a mix of dread and anticipation. I woke up early, unable to sleep as I rehearsed my testimony in my mind. My lawyer had prepared me thoroughly, going over potential questions and cross-examination strategies, but nothing could fully prepare me for the emotional toll of facing Michael in court. Jennifer was there too, her presence a silent source of strength and solidarity. We had agreed to testify in each other's cases, providing first-hand accounts of Michael's deception and manipulation. We knew that our testimony would be crucial in establishing a pattern of behavior, in painting a comprehensive picture of the man behind the charming facade. The courtroom was more intimidating than I had anticipated. The high ceilings, the formal atmosphere, the serious expressions on the faces of the judge and jury, it all felt overwhelming, a stark contrast to the casual settings in which Michael had woven his web of lies. As I took the stand, I felt a surge of adrenaline, a heightened awareness of the importance of this moment. My lawyer began the questioning, guiding me through the story of my relationship with Michael, from our first meeting to the discovery of his betrayal. I spoke about the red flags I had ignored, the moments of doubt I had dismissed, and the gradual realization that something was amiss. I described the night Michael found the text message from Detective Wilson, the public humiliation I had endured, and the subsequent isolation from friends and colleagues. When it came time for the cross-examination, Michael's lawyer was aggressive, attempting to paint me as a vengeful ex-girlfriend who had fabricated the story to cover up her own infidelity. He questioned my motives, my credibility, and my mental state, suggesting that I was unstable and prone to exaggeration. But I held my ground, sticking to the facts and refusing to be baited into emotional responses.
The turning point came when my lawyer presented the evidence Detective Wilson had gathered: photographs of Michael with Jennifer, bank records showing his financial transactions, and testimonies from other women who had been deceived by Michael. Each piece of evidence was a nail in the coffin of Michael's defense, a confirmation of the truth that I had been trying to convey all along. Jennifer's testimony was equally powerful. She spoke about her marriage to Michael, the gradual erosion of trust,
and the discovery of his infidelity. Her voice was steady and composed, but the pain was evident in her eyes as she recounted the details of Michael's deception. Like me, she faced aggressive cross-examination, but she remained resilient, her testimony unwavering in the face of Michael's lawyer's attempts to discredit her. The trial lasted for 3 days, each day bringing new revelations and new evidence of Michael's misconduct. Former colleagues testified about his unethical business practices, former clients spoke about the financial losses they had suffered, and other women came forward with similar stories of deception and manipulation. The picture that emerged was of a man who had built his life on a foundation of lies, who had exploited the trust of those around him for his own gain. On the final day of the trial, as the jury deliberated, I felt a sense of exhaustion mixed with hope. The past few months had been a roller coaster of emotions, a journey from despair to determination, from victimhood to empowerment. Regardless of the outcome, I knew that I had done the right thing, that I had taken a stand not just for myself, but for all the others who had been deceived by Michael. When the jury returned with their verdict, the courtroom fell silent. The foreman stood up, his expression serious as he announced the jury's decision: guilty on all counts. A wave of relief washed over me as the reality of the verdict sank in. Justice had been served, and Michael would finally face the consequences of his actions. The sentencing was scheduled for the following month, but in the meantime, Michael's life continued to unravel. The financial firm where he worked terminated his employment, the regulatory agency revoked his license, and more clients came forward with allegations of fraud. The public perception of Michael had shifted dramatically, and he was now viewed not as a charming financial advisor, but as a con artist who had preyed on the vulnerable. For Jennifer and me, the verdict marked the beginning of a new chapter in our lives. We were no longer defined by Michael's deception, no longer trapped in the narrative he had created for us. We were free to rebuild, to heal, and to move forward with our lives. In the weeks that followed, I focused on reconnecting with friends and family, on rebuilding my professional reputation, and on processing the trauma of the past few months. I started seeing a therapist who helped me work through the complex emotions associated with Michael's betrayal and the subsequent legal battle. I also reconnected with hobbies and interests I had neglected during my relationship with Michael, rediscovering parts of myself that had been overshadowed by his presence. Jennifer, too, was focused on rebuilding her life. She had sold the house she shared with Michael and was in the process of moving to a new city, where she had accepted a teaching position at a prestigious elementary school. We talked regularly, sharing updates and offering support as we navigated the challenges of starting over. The sentencing hearing was anticlimactic compared to the trial. Michael, who had once been so confident and charismatic, now looked defeated and broken. The judge, taking into account the severity of his crimes and the impact on his victims, sentenced him to 5 years in prison, followed by probation and restitution to his victims. It was a fitting end to a story of deception and betrayal, a reminder that actions have consequences and that the truth, no matter how long it takes, will eventually come to light. As I left the courthouse that day, the sun shining brightly overhead, I felt a sense of closure, of finality. The past few months had been a journey of self-discovery and empowerment, a testament to the resilience of the human spirit in the face of adversity. I had been through hell and back, but I had emerged stronger, wiser, and more determined than ever to live life on my own terms. 6 months after the trial, I found myself sitting in a cafe, sipping a latte, and reflecting on the journey that had brought me to this point. The past year had been transformative, a period of healing, growth, and self-discovery. I had rebuilt my life from the ground up, creating a new reality that was authentically mine, free from the shadows of Michael's deception. My career had flourished in the aftermath of the trial. The marketing firm where I worked had recognized my resilience and strength, promoting me to a senior position with increased responsibilities and a higher salary. I had also started a side business, offering consulting services to small businesses looking to improve their marketing strategies. The work was challenging but rewarding, allowing me to channel my creativity and expertise into something meaningful. My social life had also undergone a transformation. Many of the friends who had abandoned me during the initial fallout had reached out, offering apologies and explanations for their behavior. Some relationships were rekindled, based on a newfound understanding and mutual respect. Others, however, were beyond repair, the trust too damaged to be restored. I learned to be selective about the people I allowed into my life, valuing quality over quantity and surrounding myself with those who supported and uplifted me. Jennifer and I remained close, our bond strengthened by our shared experience. She had settled into her new city, finding joy in her work as a kindergarten teacher and building a new community of friends. We talked regularly, sharing updates and offering support as we continued to navigate the aftermath of Michael's betrayal. We had even planned a vacation together, a chance to celebrate our freedom and the new beginnings we had both embraced. One of the most significant changes in my life was my approach to relationships. I had taken time to heal, to process the trauma of Michael's deception, and to understand the red flags I had missed. I worked with a therapist to explore patterns in my relationships, to identify the vulnerabilities that had made me susceptible to Michael's manipulation. It was a difficult process, filled with moments of self-doubt and introspection, but it was also empowering, giving me the tools and insight to build healthier relationships in the future. I had started dating again, cautiously and with a newfound sense of self-awareness. I met people through mutual friends, through work, and through online dating, but I took my time getting to know them, setting clear boundaries and expectations. I learned to trust my instincts, to recognize the warning signs I had ignored in my relationship with Michael, and to prioritize my own well-being and happiness. The media coverage of Michael's case had eventually faded, replaced by new scandals and new stories of betrayal. But the impact of those stories, the lessons learned, and the insights gained remained with me. I had even considered writing a book about my experience, a memoir that would not only tell my story, but also offer guidance and support to others who had been through similar situations. As I sat in the cafe, watching the world go by outside, I felt a sense of gratitude for the journey that had brought me to this point. The pain and humiliation of Michael's betrayal had been transformative, forcing me to confront my own vulnerabilities and to find strength in the face of adversity. I had emerged from the experience with a deeper understanding of myself and a renewed appreciation for the resilience of the human spirit. The story of my relationship with Michael, the public shaming, and the subsequent legal battle had become a cautionary tale, a reminder that things are not always as they seem, and that the truth, no matter how deeply buried, will eventually come to light. But for me, it was more than just a cautionary tale. It was a testament to the power of perseverance, the importance of standing up for oneself, and the possibility of redemption and renewal. As I finished my latte and prepared to leave the cafe, I thought about the woman I had been a year ago, naive and trusting, blind to the red flags that had been waving in front of me all along. I felt a sense of compassion for her, for the pain and confusion she had endured. But I also felt a sense of pride in the woman I had become, stronger, wiser, and more resilient than ever before. The road ahead was not without its challenges, but I faced it with confidence and optimism, secure in the knowledge that I had overcome the worst and emerged victorious. The story of "everyone called me a cheater, but they don't know the truth" had reached its conclusion, but my story, the story of Amanda, was just beginning. As I stepped out into the bright sunlight, a smile on my face and a spring in my step, I knew that whatever the future held, I was ready to face it head-on, armed with the lessons of the past and the promise of a new beginning. The truth had set me free, and I was determined to make the most of my newfound freedom, to live a life filled with love, laughter, and authenticity.